What's the best get fucked Karen experience you've ever had? Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, and I'd really appreciate it if you leave a like and comment something related to the topic. Let's begin. Story 1. My brother held the door open for a pair of older women walking into a store behind us. One of them screamed at him not to hold the door just because she was a woman. He replied, "I'm not. I'm holding it because of your age." Story 2. I worked at a pizza shop as a delivery driver when I was younger. The shop was owned by 3 extremely polite, professional, and hardworking Russian men, 2 brothers, and a cousin. I took a delivery just down the street, maybe a 1/10 of a mile away. The guy comes out angry, ranting about how they shouldn't have someone with such a heavy accent taking orders because nobody can understand what the fuck he's saying, and I just want my order correct. I told him I'd pass along the message. When I got back, I told the owner who had taken the order about the guy's complaint. The owner immediately called him and said that if he didn't like the way he spoke, he could fuck off and order from somewhere else since he was too lazy to drive 30 seconds to place the order in person. He ended the call with, "Do you understand my English now?" Story 3. About 25 years ago, at an expensive steakhouse in Dallas, a couple of middle-aged women were led to their table by a young waiter. The place was surprisingly almost empty at the time. A few minutes after looking over the menu, the waiter approached them to ask if they were ready to order. I don't know what caused one of the women to start yelling, but the waiter ended up walking away, politely saying something along the lines of, "I don't have to put up with your attitude." Not even a minute later, a tall older man with a perfectly trimmed white beard, dressed immaculately in a cowboy outfit, hat included, approached their table to ask about the situation. The man looked like he meant business. His demeanor and the way he carried himself radiated authority. He didn't need to speak to command attention. You just knew he was the owner. He approached the table and crouched down to meet the women at eye level, as if he were sitting with them. After a short, quiet exchange, he stood up straight, never breaking eye contact, and in a calm but firm voice said, "I'm going to bring the waiter back, and you will apologize to him, loudly and publicly, just like you were berating him. If you choose not to, I'll personally escort you out of the restaurant." Everyone, including me and my entire table, froze and turned to watch. It genuinely felt like an old Western showdown was about to happen. The woman couldn't believe the man was siding with the waiter, and even worse, that everyone was watching her reaction. With a defeated, angry expression, she slammed her napkin on the table and said, "Fine, bring him back," as if trying to salvage some dignity. The waiter returned, and the woman apologized. He didn't show an ounce of pride or smugness, just quiet professionalism. He accepted the apology, and business carried on as usual. Story 4. We were at Disney World for a club trip back in high school. My brother, some friends, and I were waiting in line for Space Mountain. My brother got briefly separated, maybe for a minute, after getting distracted by something in the queue. When he tried to rejoin us, only about 2 families had gotten between us during that time. The guy standing directly behind us wasn't having it. He started physically pushing my brother back, refusing to let him return to his spot. We told him, "Dude, he was just looking at something for a second. He's with us. He's been in front of you this whole time." But the guy kept insisting he couldn't get back in line and continued to push him. A cast member happened to be walking by, so we told them that the guy behind us was aggressively putting his hands on my brother. The cast member immediately escorted the guy out of line, LMFAO. His family didn't even react. They just stayed in line like nothing had happened. Story 5. About 25 years ago, I worked at a family-owned sub shop. One night, a very drunk guy came in and rudely demanded half an Italian. He didn't specify whether he meant a cold cut, a steak sub, or anything else. After some confusing back and forth, we figured he probably wanted a cold cut, so we made it and handed it over. He paid for it, though he could barely keep his eyes open. He was that plastered. Still, that didn't stop him from being loud, aggressive, and belligerent about everything. He had a reputation as an annoying customer, but never this bad. Anyway, after paying, he shuffled a couple of feet over from the register. The next customer stepped up to order, but meanwhile, the drunk guy opened up his sub right there at the counter. He started tearing it apart, flailing his hands around, tossing shredded lettuce and tomato everywhere, even onto the other customer, and cursing up a storm. He was slurring something like, "This fucking shit ain't what I ordered, goddammit. I want a fucking half Italian." Mid-sentence, The owner vaulted over the counter, grabbed the guy, bent him over, and literally used his head as a battering ram to throw him out the side door. The whole thing took maybe 10 seconds, and the owner was back behind the counter finishing the next customer's order like nothing happened. It was straight out of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, like when Uncle Phil tosses Jazz out of the house. It was glorious. The drunk idiot never came back. Story 6. When I worked in retail, I was the guy who went outside to bring in the shopping carts. One particularly busy day, as I was pushing a line of carts back inside, I noticed a woman in her mid-40s standing near the cart area. I didn't think much of it and just started putting the carts away. Out of nowhere, she yelled at me from about 30 feet away while standing next to multiple available carts to bring her one. I figured I must have misheard her since she was literally right next to several, so I just looked at her and waved. She looked shocked, yelled, "Bring me a cart right now," and even snapped her fingers at me. I laughed, turned around, and went back outside to grab more carts. A few minutes later, she filed a complaint about a very rude cart boy. LOL. Story 7. Not a Karen, but definitely a Kevin. Years ago, I was at my usual karaoke bar, and it just so happened there was a class reunion for my old high school going on. The class of '82, literally the last of the baby boomers. The bar always does trivia first, then karaoke, and I'm friends with the guy who runs both. These people were loud, obnoxious, and drunk before it even got dark. Trivia ended up running late because my friend had to keep stopping, repeating questions, and asking the boomers to quiet down. By 8 p.m., they were already sloppy and wasted. When karaoke finally started, almost an hour late, my friend was so pissed and drained from dealing with them that he skipped his usual opening song and told me to go first. He didn't even bother adjusting the sound much, just cranked the volume up because the boomers were practically drowning out the music anyway. About 30 seconds before I finished my song, one of those boomers stumbled up to the stage and tried to yank the microphone out of my hand so he could drunkenly shout "Class of '82." Except all he managed to get out was "Class of '80, OOF," because I punched him in the gut while pulling the mic back. He stumbled, I shoved him, and we both fell off the stage wrestling for the microphone. My friend jumped in to try to save it. Those mics cost him $400 each, and he had just replaced them. We were all struggling on the ground when I suddenly felt a hand grab my shoulder. Someone lifted me up and set me back on my feet. I turned around and saw this massive boomer towering over me, easily a foot taller, fist cocked back like he was ready to swing. I think he expected me to back down or apologize. Instead, I just patted my cheek like I was daring him to take the shot. He glared and said, "You're not worth it," before trying to walk away. But by then, the bouncer had come over and was sorting everything out. Big Boomer tried to claim I started it, but the bouncer had seen the whole thing. He kicked out the super drunk guy and told the big one he had to leave too since he'd threatened me. The guy started arguing, saying I should be kicked out as well. The bouncer looked at me and said, "I saw everything. You're not in trouble, but step outside until I get these assholes out of here. Then you can come back in." So I went outside for a smoke to calm down. One of my friends came out and asked what happened just as the big guy and his wife were leaving. While staring right at him, I said to my friend, "It's getting late. The old people have to go home." He started blustering again, but everyone around us began yelling at him to just get lost while his wife dragged him away. Eventually, he gave up and left. When I went back inside, I ran into my uncle. He'd been there for the reunion too, but we hadn't seen each other in the crowd earlier. Turns out, he's a sheriff's deputy. He told me, "I saw what happened. I know that big guy. He's a corrections officer. I'll have a word with his boss on Monday about what he did here." I never got an update on what happened after that, but I like to think his boss made him feel small. Story 8. I worked at a local grocery store for about 7 months. It was my first job ever, and the only reason I left was because I was moving in with my grandma. It was maybe my third to last day, around 10 p.m., and I was training one of the new hires. She was doing great, going through the motions like she'd worked there her whole life. I was mostly just giving her produce codes and helping out whenever the system decided to freeze. Then this woman came through with her groceries for the week. The new hire, let's call her Jane, asked for her loyalty number and did the usual small talk. The customer gave those short, cold answers in that tone that screams, "You're beneath me." Jane picked up on it quickly and just focused on scanning, passing items to me to bag. When the transaction was done and the woman had paid, We both wished her a good night. Jane turned to greet the next customer. "Hello? Do you have a phone number with? Did you put my phone number in?" The whole line went dead silent. Even the customers behind her looked stunned at how fast she snapped. Jane froze, flustered, and stammered, I can't remember," before looking at me for help. There was a way to check, but in the moment, I totally blanked because this lady was just glaring daggers at us. Me? I can't remember either. "I'm so sorry about that, ma'am." Her, "Well, get it on my number." Me? "Okay, but just so you know, the only way to do that is to refund the entire transaction and ring everything back up." Her, handing me the receipt. "All right, I'm willing to do that." Me? "Sorry, we can only do refunds up front. Let me grab the manager for you." So I went and got the manager, who was cleaning registers nearby. She took over, and I went back to help Jane. Meanwhile, this woman was not being quiet about her complaints. I shouldn't have to babysit everything they do. Maybe if your cashiers weren't so incompetent. Jane was clearly hearing every word, and the customers behind her were trying to distract her. Bless them. Now, our manager only worked 1 day a week. This was her side job, and she was done with this lady's nonsense. She said, "You're right, you shouldn't have to babysit them. But that cashier is new, and as a regular here, you should have known that. I'm not going to tolerate you belittling my cashiers, so if you keep being snippy, I'll bite right back. Also, your transaction is already under your phone number, so your little tantrum was for nothing. Oh, and by the way, 4 of those Mountain Dews. You didn't pay for them." I gained so much respect for that manager that night. And I really hope Jane's still going strong, because she went through hell for no reason. For clarification, the unpaid Mountain Dews were a mistake on Jane's part. The quantity button sometimes glitches, but still, the irony was perfect. The lady's attitude cost her free soda. Story 9. I used to work at a fancy natural foods and vitamin store during the summer between college semesters. We got our fair share of Karens. Think gluten-free this. I'm allergic to that. The whole stereotype. For context, there was this local bakery that made insanely good gluten-free bread. Every time we got it in stock, it sold out within hours. Deliveries came on Tuesday and Friday mornings, and our regulars knew that schedule well. One Thursday evening, a woman came in, so basically zero chance we had any bread left. She looked around for about 30 seconds before marching up to me and demanding the bread. Not asking, literally just barking the brand name at me. I told her where it would normally be, but explained that we were probably out of stock. She barely listened and snapped, "Check in the back." Now, this was a small store. We didn't really have a proper back room, just a tiny storage area for cleaning supplies and a few overflow items. We definitely didn't keep local bakery deliveries back there. Still, I knew it wasn't worth arguing, so I went to check, knowing full well there was nothing to find. I came back empty-handed, and she immediately demanded to speak with a manager. I got my manager, who told her, word for word, the same thing I did. She finally accepted she wasn't getting her precious bread that night, and we told her we'd have more the next morning when the new delivery came in. Fast forward to Friday. She shows up again at 7 p.m. We opened at 8 a.m., so naturally, the bread was long gone. She stormed up, demanded her bread, and I wasn't even sure if she recognized me or not. Still, I went through the same motions, apologized, checked the back, and explained that we sold out hours ago. She lost it again. Same escalation, same drama, same outcome. She left empty-handed. We figured that was the end of it, until the next day, when the bakery called us. The guy on the phone said they'd received complaints from a customer claiming we were refusing to sell her bread. My manager explained the whole situation, and I could literally hear the bakery guy laughing his ass off. Turns out, this woman had already been banned from their bakery for making a scene and throwing things at employees. She'd been going around to every store that sold their bread and harassing staff in the exact same way. A few days later, my manager officially banned her from our store too. The next time she tried to come in, I happened to be there, and the look on her face when she realized she wasn't allowed in was priceless. You could actually see the moment it hit her that her actions had consequences. A few months later, we found out the cherry on top. She was the ex-wife of the bakery owner. Story 10. Back when I was in college, I had a part-time job at a call center for a cell phone company. Most of my calls came from 2 kinds of people, those with minor tech issues, and those having problems with their bills or service. A lot of the billing issues were from customers who hadn't paid their cell phone bills on time and got their service suspended. Usually, these were people with terrible credit, which was why the company only gave them a very limited type of contract. Strict caps on spending, strict limits on overdue balances, and automatic suspension if they didn't pay within a short time. It was partly to protect them from racking up even more charges, but also because the company knew they had awful payment histories and couldn't risk letting them pile up thousands of dollars in debt they'd never pay. One day, this absolute nightmare of a woman called, screaming at me to reactivate her service immediately. After checking her account and calmly explaining the situation, I told her she'd need to pay her outstanding balance before her line could be restored. She lost it, demanding to know how some nobody working at a call center dared to tell her, a successful and important entrepreneur, what to do with her money. She went on and on about how my incompetence was causing her to lose business because her wealthy clients couldn't reach her. I was about 19 at the time, and I admit I lost my cool. I told her that I was just a college student working part-time, and even so, I had a better credit score than her. Unlike her, I understood that paying my damn phone bill was my responsibility. I also knew how to read the contracts I signed, and no important business person had a $150 credit limit on their cell phone account. And if, for some insane reason, they did, and it was actually critical for their job, they'd pay the bill on time every month. She exploded, demanded to speak to my supervisor, and honestly, I was so done with her that I didn't even care if I got fired. I handed my headset to my supervisor. After listening to her rant and putting her on hold for a second to check with me, he went right back on the line and told her, calmly but firmly, to pay her overdue balance and stop wasting everyone's time. He told her the only way her service would have been suspended was if she was over a month late on payments, which was completely her fault, and that no one was going to bend the rules just because she was pretending to be some VIP. Then, when she tried to argue, he hung up on her. He turned to me, handed me my headset, and gave me a small nod before walking back to his desk like Wolverine walking away from an exploding helicopter. Story 11. I was working as a videographer for a business conference full of middle managers trying to posture their way into executive positions. The event was held at a tropical beach resort, super fancy, super over the top, all designed to scream wealth and success. Our client, who happened to be my boss's cousin and the ultimate head honcho for the whole conference, told us we could eat the same catered meals provided for attendees. The food was amazing, so my crew and I happily grabbed some plates during one of the meal breaks. While we were eating, one of the attendees noticed that we weren't wearing suits and ties. He strutted over and, with this smug look on his face, told us he was part of the steering committee for this closed event. He warned us that this would be the last meal we'd get away with stealing and threatened that if he saw us again, he'd contact the hotel staff to have us arrested. Fast forward to later that evening. We had an interview room set up after dinner to record testimonials and commentaries from organizers and attendees, all under the supervision of our client. Guess who walked in next to be interviewed? Yep, the same guy. The look on his face when he realized he'd threatened the people his boss had hired, and who worked directly for the boss's cousin, was priceless. He didn't apologize, but his shiny bald head immediately started sweating like crazy. We took full advantage of it, made sure to overexpose the lighting just enough to make his scalp gleam on camera, and we had a series of very unfortunate technical difficulties that dragged out the shoot way longer than necessary. After he finally left, our client noticed the tension in the room and asked what had happened. We told him the whole story. Without hesitation, he removed the guy from the steering committee and had him sent home the next morning. All he had to do was mind his own business. It would have cost him nothing. Instead, he got himself kicked out of a luxury resort conference while we spent the rest of the week filming until mid-afternoon and partying like rich people every night, all while getting paid. That guy really missed out. Story 12. First, there was this woman who lived next door to my block of flats. She had a dog, and for years she'd walk it through the common area of our building to get home. Technically, it was private property, but nobody really cared because it didn't bother anyone. She was just cutting through to save a few steps, and life went on. Now for part 2. My dad's a bit of a cheapskate, but in a harmless way. Where we live, there's a recycling program that gives you 10 cents per can, so he goes through the shared bins on collection night to grab them. He only does it when the bins are already on the curb, ready for pickup, and he checks the neighboring properties too. It might sound odd, but around here it's actually pretty common. There are a bunch of older guys on our street who do the same thing. It's almost like a friendly rivalry between them. This woman, however, was not one of those people. So one night, my dad did his usual can collecting round, including the bins from the flats next door. He's been doing this for a long time and nobody's ever had a problem with it. But after he came home, there was a knock on the door. I wasn't there at the time. For context, I own the flat, and my dad is a very quiet, non-confrontational man. Turns out, this woman, the same one with the dog, had marched over to tell him that the bins out on the curb were meant for her adult son, and that only he was allowed to collect cans from them. Keep in mind, these are shared bins for her entire building, not her personal property. Other residents there actually talk to my dad and are totally fine with him collecting cans. And again, the bins were out on the street, not on anyone's private land. When I got home later, my dad was visibly shaken. He doesn't have a lot of extra money, so the few dollars he earns from collecting cans is his fun money. Plus, he genuinely cares about the environment. He feels like he's doing something good by helping recycle. Some of the neighbors even asked if he was okay because they'd heard the commotion she caused. I was pissed. About a week later, I took a day off work. As usual, she came walking her dog and started cutting through our property. I walked out, stopped her, and asked if she owned one of the flats. She said no. So I reminded her, very clearly, that she was on private property and that if she did it again, I'd call the cops. I told her, I don't go on your property, so you shouldn't be on mine. The look on her face was chef's kiss. I'll never forget it. After some weak excuses and a half-hearted, I'm not doing anything wrong, she finally agreed to stop cutting through. My dad no longer collects cans from their bins. But on the bright side, that woman hasn't set foot on our property since. In fact, every time she sees me now, she turns around and walks the other way. Story 13. I was at Starbucks once with my toddler, standing in line behind a woman. She seemed perfectly nice at first, just chatting casually, until she asked the cashier if they could make change for her. The barista very politely explained that their system literally doesn't allow them to open the register unless there's a cash sale or transaction. I chimed in with a friendly, "Yeah, they really don't let the staff do much these days. Bummer," just to show empathy toward both her and the employees. But she would not let it go. She launched into the classic, "I come here all the time" speech and started demanding they make an exception. The shift supervisor came over, trying his absolute best to explain that it was literally impossible for them to open the drawer. Meanwhile, the line was getting longer, the store was slammed, and the drive-thru was backed up too. Then she started raising her voice at the staff, being completely rude and condescending. That's when I stepped in. I told her she was behaving inappropriately and that she couldn't expect the employees to magically break company policy just because she was a regular. She snapped back and told me to mind my own business. I replied, "They can't speak up because they want to keep their jobs, so someone has to." That's when she got this furious, scrunched-up look on her face and, in a last-ditch attempt to insult me, called me Mr. Cool Ponytail. I actually laughed out loud. It was such a weird, desperate insult. She even repeated it, fumbling for words like, "you," and "your ponytail." I couldn't stop smiling. Then she proudly announced that she was a business owner, as if that somehow made her right. I told her I had no idea what that had to do with anything. She stormed out after that. After things calmed down, the supervisor quietly slipped me a couple of gift cards as a thank you, which was super kind of him and totally unnecessary. For the record, my hair wasn't even in a ponytail, it was in a messy bun. Story 14. I used to have this really strange coworker. Every Friday, our team would go to the same barbecue joint for lunch, and without fail, this guy would walk up to the counter and order a wagon, no wheel. The cashier, usually a different person each week, would always stare at him blankly, completely confused. He'd then sigh and explain, "It's a chuck wagon sandwich with no bun." We went through this routine every single week for almost a year. One day, the restaurant had just installed a new soda dispenser, and as we were getting our drinks, a guy standing nearby asked us what we thought of it. We told him it was nice, and he smiled, thanking us and explaining that he was the owner of the place. Without missing a beat, My coworker launched into a rant about how the owner needed to hire smarter people to work the register. The owner raised an eyebrow and asked what he meant. My coworker proudly explained that the staff never knew what a wagon, no wheel was. The owner blinked and said, "What the hell is a wagon, no wheel?" My coworker repeated his explanation, that it meant a chuck wagon sandwich with no bun. "Jesus Christ," the owner said, shaking his head. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Who the hell thinks they can just make up their own names for food that's not on the menu?" Then he looked my coworker dead in the eyes and said, "Are you some kind of moron, pal?" My coworker stumbled over his words, mumbling that he wasn't, and the owner cut him off. "Then stop saying stupid shit to my staff. Order off the menu, or get out." We sat down, ate our lunches in silence, and from that day on, my coworker never ordered a wagon, no wheel again. Story 15. I was working at the fishmonger's counter in a supermarket in the UK. It was my last ever shift before moving across the country to start a new career. I was enjoying the day, but honestly, I couldn't have cared less about what I did at that point. I was checked out and ready to go. Toward the end of my shift, no one had come to relieve me. I was in the middle of filleting a salmon, a process that takes about 10 to 15 minutes including deboning, and I was already 10 minutes past the time I was supposed to clock out. That's when this very snooty woman strutted up, snapped her fingers at me, and said, "Boy, I want a salmon filleted too. I want this one, and I'll be back in 10 minutes to collect it." I just looked at her and said, "Yeah, that's not going to happen. I'm already 10 minutes late leaving, and I'm not sticking around any longer. Also, don't be so rude." She immediately lost it, huffing, puffing, and berating me for calling her rude. She started threatening to report me to customer service, my manager, corporate, basically anyone she could think of, if I didn't prepare her salmon right now. At that point, I decided to pull out my trump card. I said, "Sure thing, go ahead and complain. This is my last shift. Actually, as of 15 minutes ago, I'm technically no longer employed by this company. So honestly, take your attitude and get fucked. Maybe someone else will come and fillet your salmon, but you're not my problem anymore. Fuck you and goodbye." Then I walked off, flipping the bird over both shoulders as I left. She absolutely exploded, yelling, cursing, and declaring she'd never shop there again. Classic Karen meltdown. Honestly, it felt amazing. After dealing with people like her for years, getting to go out in a blaze of glory like that was perfect. It was 3 p.m., I'd been up since 4:45, and I was done. So yeah, get fucked, Karen. Story 16. I work at a small local bakery, small enough to feel cozy, but big enough that we have 2 locations. One day, a woman came in to order a cake, already looking irritated and impatient. I led her to the order area where the computers are. She brought her own coffee, which we actually sell, and that would have been fine, except it was in an open mug. I didn't say anything, though, because she was clearly in a mood, and I just wanted things to go smoothly. I handed her our big cake catalog to look through. It's this massive, detailed book that's kind of a pain to replace, and she immediately started walking toward our lobby with it. I quickly said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we've had a few people accidentally walk off with that book before, so I have to ask you to stay at the counter while you look through it." She got huffy right away and snapped, "So I have to stand the whole time?" I told her no, of course not, and brought her a chair so she could sit comfortably. She sat down, and then set her coffee right on top of the computer modem. Trying to stay polite, I said, "Ma'am, I'm really sorry, but could you please move your coffee so we don't have any accidents?" That was it. She completely lost it, started yelling about how this was why she wanted to sit in the lobby, how I was making her feel disrespected and uncomfortable, and how she'd never been treated so rudely. Then she slammed the book down on the counter, stormed out, and shouted that she was going to our other location to place her order instead, and that she'd be telling them all about how terrible we were. Not even 2 minutes after she left, our head baker came out and said, "No more cake orders for either store. We're officially full." I have never felt such pure, quiet satisfaction. That woman walked out of our store fully able to order a cake, drove all the way to the other location, and found out she couldn't anymore, all because she couldn't stop being a Karen for 5 minutes. And the best part? She has no one to blame but herself. Story 17. I used to work security at a factory. We weren't part of the company itself. Our security team was contracted from an outside firm. The third shift foreman was the son-in-law of the big boss, and he was a complete jerk. Every night, he'd park right in the fire zone next to the building, even though it was clearly marked no parking. I noted it in my daily reports a few nights in a row, just doing my job. Eventually, he confronted me. He came up and basically said, "I'm Mr. Big's son-in-law. I can park wherever I want. If you want to keep your job, you'll stop writing me up." All right then. Message received. The next night, my supervisor came by for her routine inspection and immediately noticed his car parked in the fire lane. She asked why I hadn't written it up. I told her what he'd said. She frowned and said, "I don't care who he is. Write it up every time. That's your job." So now I was stuck between a rock and a hard place. The arrogant foreman threatening my job on one side, and my own supervisor demanding I report him on the other. A little later, the third in command at the factory, who also oversaw security, came by. He was one of the good ones, friendly, fair, and always stopped to chat. He asked how things were going, so I told him about the situation. He listened carefully, nodded, and said, "You're doing the right thing. Keep writing it up every time." Then he smiled and added, "But don't worry, after tomorrow, you won't see it again." Sure enough, the next night, the foreman's car wasn't in the fire zone. In fact, he never parked there again. He also stopped speaking to me entirely, but that was fine by me. I never heard another word about it. Story 18. Do male Karens count? Because this guy definitely qualified. A few years back, my sister was in a car accident that left her wheelchair-bound for a few months. When she started feeling well enough to get out of the house, she still needed the chair, so I offered to take her out for a bit. We used my mom's car. It's a really nice one, way nicer than what two 20-somethings would normally drive, but it fit her wheelchair best. We also had a handicap placard, obviously, because she was in a wheelchair. We pulled into a handicapped spot at a local store, and right away I noticed this older guy, probably in his early 70s, glaring at us. Whatever, people stare. I got out of the car, planning to grab my sister's wheelchair from the trunk first before getting my stuff. But before I could even move, this man stomped over and started screaming at me. "How dare you park in that spot? That's for handicapped people. Whose placard did you steal? You young people have no consideration for anyone but yourselves." He just kept going, louder and louder, while a small crowd started gathering to watch. I didn't say a word. I just waited until he finally stopped to catch his breath. Then, without even looking at him, I clicked the key fob, popped open the trunk, pulled out my sister's wheelchair, and unfolded it with a loud thunk right on the pavement. The guy went completely silent. His face turned red, like cartoon tomato red, and he spun around and practically ran off without saying a single word. Did he apologize? Of course not. Karens, male or female, never do. Story 19. I worked at a grocery store when I was in high school, in one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone. The store closed at 9 p.m., but our shifts went until 9:30 so we could count the registers, lock up, and turn off the lights. Of course, we'd still keep a few lights on so we could see what we were doing, which meant some people assumed we were still open. It wasn't uncommon for folks to yank on the doors or even try to force them open. Despite the massive closed sign, they literally had to move to get in. One night around 9:20, a woman showed up and immediately started screaming at me when she realized the door was locked. I said, "Sorry, we closed 20 minutes ago. We're locking up now. You'll have to come back tomorrow or go somewhere else." She lost it, started shouting, "This is illegal. You're intentionally trying to starve me and my family. I know your boss, and I'm calling the police right now." Everyone claimed they knew the owner because the store literally had his name on the sign. She stormed off to her car, phone in hand. I shrugged, went to the back, and started counting my drawer. About 10 minutes later, I heard this massive crash from the front of the store. I ran out, only to find the front doors completely smashed in. The woman had gone to her car, grabbed a tire iron, and started beating the glass doors with it, over and over, until she broke her way inside. We later watched the footage, and it was exactly that, her just slamming it again and again until the door gave out. When I got out front, she was inside, standing smugly at the register with a gallon of milk and a couple of magazines in her hands. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Come on now, ring me up. I don't have all night." I was stunned. I asked why she thought that was okay, and she smiled and said, "It's my right. You denied me groceries, so I had to make my own way in." Then she giggled. A few seconds later, Police lights flashed outside. Turns out, she really had called the cops. And when they arrived, they saw a busted door, a terrified teenager, and a woman holding a tire iron. She looked at them and said, "It's okay. Officers, you can go easy on him. I eventually got my groceries. Go light on the sentencing." One of the officers walked over to me and asked, "Hey son, what's going on here?" Then he turned and immediately pulled his gun on her. I explained everything, and the whole time she was screaming, "That's a lie. That's not what happened. He's the one at fault." They arrested her right there, and I showed them the surveillance footage proving she'd destroyed the doors after calling the police on me. Never saw her again after that, but I only worked there for another month anyway. The original owner had retired and handed the store to his brother and sister-in-law, who were terrible. They actually tried to blame me for the damage and wanted me to pay for the new doors. I just laughed and said, "Dude, I'm 16, and I wasn't even supposed to be here alone. That's illegal." Then I quit. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, activate the notification bell, and share a similar story or anything you'd like to say in the comments. See you next time.